Welcome back to the Triple Option. Paul Catalina alongside today's co-host Chris Allman. Tomorrow will be Royden Ogletree from KWTX. And Chris, we are going to wrap up the show giving an honest assessment of the Netflix 4-part documentary, Swamp Kings, which I will just say Johnny Manziel got 1 part, Swamp Kings got 4. And I feel a little shortchanged on Johnny and long changed, tall changed.
Yeah.
On Swamp Kings.
Yeah, so where do you want to start on this? Do you want to talk?
We're going to talk about realignment first, but
Okay,
I just wanted to kind of tease that coming up here in the last segment of the Triple Option for the premiere show. And if you're watching us right now, I appreciate you tuning in live. And if you're watching us later, I appreciate that as well. Carve out some time in your life and watch.
And if you went to Texas A&M, I'm sorry for insulting you earlier.
But you're not really.
I'm not. It wasn't an insult.
It was, look, you said, I hope you have pain in your life.
Yeah.
And the justification behind that pain is really petty.
Yeah, super petty.
Yeah, it is. That's what sports are. Sports are the place you can go to be petty.
Yeah.
It's the only acceptable world where pettiness is allowed.
Yes. I want hurt, not harm. Is that fair?
Exactly.
There you go.
Absolutely. All right, so college realignment shuffled the deck. Right now, we are awaiting what's going to happen with the ACC and reports from Nicole Auerbach, Pete Thamel. We had Nicole on the show last week. I suggest you go back and watch that interview. She did a great job of kind of assessing where the ACC is as opposed to in place of adding these schools, why there's opposition to it. The opposition is kind of obvious, is that there's schools that maybe aren't emotionally in it for the long haul with the ACC and don't want to upset the apple cart.
Right.
Or even adding them, they're not going to get the money that they want and won't.
Right.
But as that 30,000-foot view, college football fan, Cal and Stanford, SMU kind of almost makes sense to me when you're adding a team because the ACC would be doing essentially what the Big 12 did. Yeah. And adding a school, from a major market that was putting resources behind something. But Cal and Stanford join the ACC is a marriage of convenience, and convenience in its loosest term.
Yeah.
How do you feel about that as a college football fan?
I don't like it at all.
Yeah.
But I can't tell if I don't like it for legitimate reasons or I just don't like that it's changing. Mm-hmm. Because I liked the regional nature of college football. Mm-hmm. It's how it was when I was younger. It's how I grew up. Paul, I liked Rice and Baylor, in 1992. I liked those games. And so this made for TV pseudo-professional football league that exists, it doesn't appeal to me. And I don't think that's the intent. I don't think that the powers that be are thinking about a guy like me, right? They're thinking about eyeballs on the TV. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a guy there's nothing about SC Michigan in the regular season that appeals to me. Yeah. I want to see them play in the Rose Bowl. Yeah. Once a year, once every 5 years. I don't want to see conference games like that. And so I get I like a lot of this movement for basketball reasons. Mm-hmm. As a basketball fan, I really like the teams that we're going to see here locally. I like some of those changes. But I think for average college football fan, it has sucked the joy out of college football. Now, when they kick it off, it's still really fun to watch. When you're there live, the experience is still phenomenal. That's not going to change. And people are not going to stop watching. But it doesn't make sense. And I don't think anybody cares that I don't think it makes sense. No.
But it is weird that the only thing we used to complain about as fans was the postseason didn't make any sense. Every other sport that makes far less money has this really ornate postseason.
Right.
Basketball does.
Right.
Baseball does. Softball does.
Yes.
All sports that even basketball makes a lot of money on the tournament. But still, overall, these decisions are made by football because football makes more money. So football makes more money and had a less reasonable postseason format.
Right.
And now we're getting to that. But we have I never thought I would know this much about media deals. I never thought it would be one of those things where I'd have to dive down into, even being in the media, and learn about.
Yeah.
Because I think maybe we're all operating under the assumption that everybody sees college football as, well, it's this region and this region and this region and this region, and then at the end of the year they'll play each other in a postseason kind of game, whether it's a bowl game or something different. And then it was just well, no, what if we this bowl game that was these two teams got a lot of ratings. What if we could make it so they played every year?
Yes.
That to me is where I it's hard to follow in that.
I agree. I compare it to interleague play.
Yeah.
I like the old National League teams play National League teams, American League teams play American League teams, and you see those guys on the field together twice a year, All-Star Game and World Series.
Yeah.
The novelty, for lack of a better term, is I think what makes it great.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't want to see an interdivision game.
Well, and like interleague play the first way they did it, which was like it was 2 weeks of the year,
right?
Where you played a couple of them. I liked that.
That was
because
okay.
That was a little bit, especially when they did the unbalanced schedule. You can get really tired of watching the same teams over and over again.
Right.
So like that I don't mind. I just this way of, like you said,
yes,
it's like all sprinkles and no ice cream sometimes when you get that.
I think it's made college football way too sterile. Mm-hmm. So I was studying up, because I'm a nerd, on the Holy War, the BYU-Utah, not the actual Holy War, but the BYU-Utah rivalry.
Yeah.
And that is if you read about some of the instances of player and fan interactions, that is a heated rivalry. There is some genuine distaste. And now those two teams are going to stay in a conference together, obviously, but putting
only kind of through a stroke of luck.
Right. So you're removing, like, look, I get it. I'm sure Bedlam has had some really tasteless, classless acts that we don't condone as human beings. But isn't that what makes college football awesome?
Yeah.
Is stuff like that? And we're losing stuff like that. And that's the draw for someone like me. I don't care that much about the laundry on the field. I'm not in awe of, again, these powerhouses playing every single year. I want the contempt that is built up from playing each other every single year. And I would just have preferred it stay the way it was. But I'm an old person.
Well, look, I'll just give people an example. They tried to make Colorado and Oregon a rivalry the whole time.
Yeah, not a rivalry.
The whole time. And Colorado and Oregon were both like, yeah,
it's fine.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Like, we want to beat them, but, I'm not going to wake up in the morning going, Colorado.
Yeah.
Like you're just not going to do that. So that's what I wonder is going to happen, maybe a lot more than just Colorado and Oregon.
Right.
It's going to happen all over the place now, where you're going to try to make Stanford and Wake Forest a rival, and Stanford people and Wake Forest people are like, oh, that's who we play on November 9th?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
There's no familiarity, right? Familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah.
And there's none. These people are going to be, first it's going to be, this is neat. It takes years.
Years to build that.
And at first it's like, well, this is cool. Here is Wake Forest in Palo Alto. This is neat. We've never seen this. But you don't have any reason to hate them.
Yeah.
I want there to be some hate. Like, Garrett hates the other SEC teams. I want that to be college football. I want it to permeate college football.
All right, speaking of SEC teams.
Speaking of teams you hate.
Yeah. I talked about it a little bit on the main show on 365 Sports, but I thought this would be a good attempt to ping pong back and forth on Swamp Kings, the documentary.
Okay.
And I will say this right off the bat. I'm very biased. Tim Tebow went 4-0 against Florida State.
Let me compose myself.
Yeah.
I didn't know you were biased.
4-0 against Florida State. So I already, have that over my head. But I was very intrigued by the U, which is one of the best sports documentaries I've ever seen. It's so well done.
Objectively good.
Yes. This was trying to be that. Except what it didn't do was honestly assess everything that went on there during that time.
Right.
Which was really short.
Right.
I mean, it was 5 years of Urban Meyer, 5-6 years that he was there.
It was quick.
Yeah.
I had issues with, I don't think it was trying to be the U. Because the guy that made the U was Billy Corbin, if I'm not mistaken, who was a huge University of Miami fan.
Yeah.
And he just laid out, this is how this team of outlaws was, and I love them. The people that made Swamp Kings, I believe it was made by an Australian production company. They don't know anything about American football. They don't know anything about Urban Meyer. And clearly what they did was make a trade. They said, we will make this documentary in exchange, we'll make it kind of the way you want in exchange for access.
Yeah.
And so I thought it was better than the Manziel documentary, which was dramatically lacking in a lot of information. I just wanted more in the Manziel doc. With this one, there was plenty of information. They just left out some really salient details to those teams and some really, important players to that era, namely Aaron Hernandez.
Yeah.
So this one was just, it wasn't fluff. I didn't hate watching it.
No, that's the thing.
But it was inaccurate.
Yeah, I was watching it, waiting for something, and there were a couple parts, and there was a tragedy. Urban Meyer kicked a player off the team.
Right.
He eventually got it deep into drugs and OD'd and died.
Yes.
And Urban Meyer blames himself for that. And he said never again. But he kicked Cam Newton off the team for stealing a laptop.
Right.
Cam Newton turned out fine.
Yeah.
Depending on how you feel about guys wearing bonnets, turned out fine.
If you're pro bonnet.
Yeah, if you're pro bonnet, no. But I mean,
guy.
Cam Newton, everything's gone pretty well for him, And so
I think this thing was made for people that don't know anything about Urban Meyer and they don't know anything about that era of the University of Florida, because then they could just flat tell you things that weren't true. Every documentary has a little bit of fluff to it, right? Every documentary has a little bit of revisionist history. But by and large, there are at least shreds of truth. And this particular thing that we were watching, Swamp Kings, it felt like I don't want to say they were telling lies, but I feel like the revisionist history was lacking some of the really important details to the thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I don't know Urban Meyer. I've never met him. I don't trust him. I don't trust anything he says.
No.
Not a lick.
Well, I mean, it left out, they mentioned Aaron Hernandez. And the two things they said about him were, kind of complimentary. And, Tim Tebow took a blame for it. And then they mentioned the recruiting class he was in, he was there.
Yeah.
And then they don't even mention, he's notorious.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of other bad things that happened. Chris Rainey, who had one of the more notorious things that's in the documentary.
Yeah.
And Urban Meyer's just talking about how much he loved watching cartoons with his son. And you're like, well, you left out the part where he threatened to murder his girlfriend.
Yeah.
And look, I'm hoping that Chris Rainey has seen the light and has reformed himself into a better person. But leaving that out of the documentary when he's in it.
Yeah.
He's actually in it.
Yeah.
Then it just takes out context of everything that went on. And I think it's an Urban Meyer rehab piece because he went out so bad in Jacksonville.
Oh, for sure. It's
so
1,000% an Urban Meyer rehab
so
piece.
bad. So he might try to get that next big job that comes open somewhere, which might wind up being back at Florida.
Yeah.
And although I do think there's some bad blood with the way he left there and then went to Ohio State and promptly won there.
Yeah.
And then Florida's not recovered from his and Tebow's not simultaneous, but near simultaneous departure.
Yeah. I think it would probably be easy. There may be a camp of people in the world that really don't like Tim Tebow, right? They may think he's a fraud. They may think he's a little too saccharine for them. I'm kind of indifferent on Tebow. I thought he was a really good player. He was a little too much for me in the doc. He was whisper talking. Everything he said was you don't know what it means, what it is to give your whole life to something. I was like, well, some of us do. Why are you whispering? Speak up. So I thought he was even a little bit much in the documentary, but at least it painted a picture of a little bit of his teammates saying yeah, we got a little tired of the Tebow love, and he doesn't shy from it, right?
Yeah.
The first shot of Tim Tebow, he's not wearing a shirt, right? It's a very Tim Tebow-rific documentary.
Yeah. I have to kind of hold back my opinions on him, as you know how I feel.
Yeah, for sure.
Because again, it's biased and it's probably not right. I was very interested in his recruitment and everything that happened because I thought the most interesting part of the documentary was how desperate Urban Meyer was for Tim Tebow.
Yeah.
I didn't think he recruited that way.
Yeah.
Where he was just pulling out all the stops and making sure that Tim Tebow knew that he was the quarterback. I feel really bad for Chris Leak, who
was really good.
Who was good. He just wasn't what Urban Meyer wanted, and he still won the title with Chris Leak.
Yeah, I kind of kept waiting for Chris Leak because he was a really integral part of that. There's a lot of ways you could have gone. He was a really good player. So he couldn't go get you a 4th and 1. They almost the way the thing was told, it was Leak couldn't get us the 4th and 1 against Ole Miss.
Well, yeah, so Tebow was Superman. I get it, but
I thought. I don't think they talked enough about Percy Harvin, both in how his wheels were off a little bit, but also just how good Percy Harvin was. And so for people like you and me who know that stuff, we watch it cynically, but we're right. We're man, they're leaving out so much stuff, including but not limited to the guy that was a killer.
Yeah.
But the Pouncey twins, barely any mention of the Pouncey twins.
You know what it felt like? It felt like going to see a movie of a book I've read.
Okay.
And then they leave out one of the best parts
Yeah.
of the book, and you're like, well, that would have been really cool to see in the movie.
Yeah.
You know, and the movie doesn't work, and you're like, well, they left out this middle part that explains all of it.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, they could have.
I think it keeps with Netflix's kind of hit or miss record with their sports content. I haven't seen the Manti Te'o Untold, but like Drive to Survive, Full Swing, that stuff that they create's really, really good. The Manziel documentary was bad. Like, it was just bad from start to finish. It was too short, left too much out. Swamp Kings was 4 hours of like, I watched it, I was interested. But again, a little bit of my interest was pointing out, well, that's wrong, and that's wrong, and well, you missed something here.
By comparison, Manti Te'o's documentary, I know you haven't seen it.
I haven't.
He had to go through all of this again, which was horribly traumatic for this poor guy.
Yeah.
And then you had to see all the things that were said about him in the media that were awful. And then Urban Meyer managed to take all that stuff out.
Yeah.
So it just makes me have much more of a high opinion of Manti Te'o.
Yeah.
Because he was willing to go through all this pain again.
Yeah.
And Urban Meyer really only wanted to tell you about the good stuff. Although he was pretty honest about that 2009 year where they were just loaded in a juggernaut and undefeated going to face Alabama, which was essentially, that was the hello Nick Saban.
Yeah.
That was their introduction to the world.
Yeah.
But he had pressed so hard on those guys because he wasn't enjoying it and then they weren't enjoying it. So
I almost feel like Meyer should have leaned into the Michael Jordan Last Dance of like, this is who I am. You know, I feel like at least we wouldn't be saying that the doc showed he was a fraud. If he just leaned in and was like, I'm an a-hole.
Yeah.
Like a little bit more, it might be different, but it was just, it was Meyer propaganda.
It was. It's unfortunate. Well, Chris, thanks so much for being here on the premiere episode. I wouldn't have picked anyone else.
Yeah, you bring out your big guns for your first one, for sure.
to help me through this first episode here on the Triple Option. Available, everything will be up on YouTube later, so you can share it with your friends and your family.
Yeah, they're dying to see me talk about sports some more.
I've made it. You can say, finally, I'm here on YouTube with so few other people. It's a very small platform that most people don't have access
to. Really cutting-edge technology.
YouTube. You're finally there, but you'll be back on Wednesday this week.
I will.
Yeah. So
what are we talking about? Do we know yet?
No, we'll figure it out.
Okay.
We'll figure it out.
Okay.
I got to worry about Tuesday before I get to Wednesday.
I'm going to watch that Manti Te'o doc. I'll give you a review on that on Wednesday.
It's going to feel genuinely awful for him. It's like one of those things where
I already do.
Yeah.
I feel bad for the guy.
But like, if you ever made a joke about poor Manti, you're going to be like, yeah, I did. I made a lot of them, and some of them he kind of earned. Like the one thing I'll tell you about it is like
you're going to retell the joke.
I'll tell you.
First it was I feel sorry for him. Now it's let me retell the joke.
No, look, I will say that. Look, you don't have a girlfriend if you've not seen her.
That's fair.
Like you don't have a girlfriend. Now,
that's fair.
If you want to say my friend that I'm close with is having problems, I get it. But he brought a little bit of this on himself. But I still feel bad because it was an ornate scheme by this one person who perpetrated it.
Having to relive all that again, poor guy.
Yeah, really tough. And he went through it, but Urban,
nobody has any sympathy for Urban.
No, didn't want to hear any of that. All right, we will be back. I'll be back on YouTube in an hour for 365 Sports Main Show with David and Craig. So we got a big show today. Hoping to get Tanner Mordecai, Wisconsin quarterback, on the show today. We're supposed to record something earlier. He had to go, be the Wisconsin quarterback.
Sure,
so we'll see what time he's going to be on this week with us. And, of course, he's from right here in River City in Waco.
That's right.
Chris, thanks a lot.
Yes,
thanks
sir.
to Jack McKenzie and Garrett Ross. We're back in tomorrow at 1 o'clock. See you then, everybody.